2 cadaver bags. That's what investigators discovered inside the front trunk of an abandoned Tesla. The remains belonged to a 14-year-old girl who had been missing for nearly a year and a half. Because for 5 months, that car sat right there, on a public street in the Hollywood Hills. Then, in an impound lot, 2 days' walk from the Hollywood Walk of Fame, people drove past it. The city issued it a parking ticket. Tow truck workers dragged it to a lot and logged it in. Nobody opened it. Nobody knew. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She was 14 years old. She loved to sing and dance. And by the time anyone found her, she'd been missing for nearly a year and a half. Then investigators uncovered a connection nobody expected. A musician with millions of listeners would eventually become the central figure in the case. His name was David Anthony Burke. Welcome to the Hidden Chapters, uncovering the truth behind every crime. Before detectives searched the Tesla, before prosecutors accused a charting musician of murder, before national headlines, there was just a 14-year-old girl who loved singing into her phone and sending videos to her friends. She was born on September 7th, 2010, in Lake Elsinore, California. Her parents, Jesus Rivas and Mercedes Martinez, described her as a beautiful, strong girl. She loved music. She was full of life in the way that 14-year-olds are. Loud about some things, secretive about others, always on her phone. She was a 7th grader at Lakeland Village School when her life first intersected with the man who would become the center of this story. She was 11 years old. He was 16. And at the time, neither of them knew that one day detectives would spend months trying to reconstruct what happened between them. His name was David Anthony Burke. Online, he went by D4VD. He'd already started building a following on social media, posting Fortnite montages set to music he made himself in his bedroom. He had a gift, a genuine one. His voice was soft and melodic, his production lo-fi and emotional, the kind of sound that travels fast on the internet. According to prosecutors and Celeste's former teacher, they met through social media. She was a fan. He noticed her. And then, somehow, a connection formed between a middle schooler in Riverside County and a rising teenage musician who was about to become famous. In 2022, everything changed for David Anthony Burke. He was 17, still in high school, when his song Romantic Homicide went viral. It racked up hundreds of millions of streams. He signed with Darkroom/Interscope Records, a major label deal, the kind of thing most artists spend their whole careers chasing. Suddenly, he wasn't just a kid making beats in his bedroom. He was a star. And Celeste was still watching. By November 2023, according to prosecutors, David Anthony Burke and Celeste began a sexual relationship. He was 18. She was 13. The age difference would later become a central part of the prosecution's case. Celeste's family had already begun to notice something was off. She'd disappear for stretches of time. She'd been reported missing before, from Lake Elsinore in 2023, and she'd come back. It happened more than once, and her family, like most families in that situation, held on to the pattern. She came back before. She'll come back again. But they also knew she had a boyfriend named David. At one point, her parents took away her phone, trying to cut off the contact. According to prosecutors, Burke's response was calculated. He paid another student $1,000 to give Celeste a new phone. He wanted to keep the line open. He needed to keep the line open. The two of them traveled together. Weekends at Burke's Hollywood Hills rental. Trips to Las Vegas, London, Texas, where his family lived. This was a 14-year-old girl being taken across state lines by a man 4 years her senior, a man who, according to the law, had no business being alone with her at all. There was a detail that would only surface later: a tattoo. Both of them had the same one, on the same finger. The word "shh" inked into the skin. A shared secret, literally written on their bodies. Celeste's mother told investigators that her daughter had that tattoo and a boyfriend named David. The matching ink on D4VD's own hand was first photographed in public in September 2024. Someone had already been told to stay quiet. If you appreciate detailed true crime documentaries that follow the evidence step by step, consider subscribing, because the timeline is about to change. There's also this. On February 17th, 2024, deputies conducted a welfare check. During that visit, Burke was explicitly told that Celeste was 13 years old. He knew exactly how old she was, and according to prosecutors, the relationship continued anyway. In April 2024, Celeste disappeared again. This time felt different to the people around her. But different is a feeling, not evidence. And feelings don't move missing persons cases forward, especially when a teenager has a documented history of running away. She had a pattern. The system had a box to put her in. Riverside County Sheriff's deputies logged the report. Lake Elsinore. Missing juvenile. History of prior runaway incidents. The last confirmed contact her family had with Celeste was a phone call at the end of May 2024. Her voice. Her. Then nothing. For months after that, her name appeared in no new police reports, no hospital records, no social media activity. She was just gone. As time stretched on, investigators had almost nothing to work with. No last known location, no confirmed sightings, no real leads. Meanwhile, D4VD's career was still moving. His debut album, Withered, was scheduled for release in April 2025. April 23, 2025, is the date prosecutors believe Celeste was murdered. Withered dropped 2 days later. Investigators would later piece together what happened in the final hours. On April 22, 2025, Celeste and Burke exchanged a string of text messages. It was a lengthy, heated argument. According to the prosecution's brief, the messages reveal she was jealous. Specifically, she was upset about Burke's relationships with other women. He had, prosecutors say, led her to believe they had a future together. And then, this is the part that prosecutors say triggered everything. She threatened to go public. She was going to expose the relationship. Think about what that meant for him. Burke was 20 years old. His career was finally arriving after years of grinding. His debut album was days away from release. Labels, management teams, publicists, endorsement deals. All of it was on the table. And a 14-year-old girl, one he'd been involved with since she was 13, was threatening to blow it all up. She became extremely upset, prosecutors wrote, and threatened to disclose damaging information about him. The next day, April 23rd, investigators believe Celeste entered Burke's Hollywood Hills rental for the last time. What happened inside that house is still being established in court, but prosecutors say she was stabbed. Multiple penetrating injuries to her chest and abdomen, including damage to her liver. The medical examiner's final cause of death, released in April 2026, confirmed it: homicide, death by stabbing. She was 14 years old. It would have been her 15th birthday in September. This is where it stops being a story about a crime and becomes a story about what comes after. Because David Burke didn't call 911. He didn't turn himself in. He didn't disappear. He kept going. The album dropped. He gave interviews. He performed. Prosecutors allege that Burke and an accomplice dismembered Celeste's body and placed her remains into 2 cadaver bags, which were then loaded into the front trunk, what Tesla owners call the frunk of his Tesla, the same car he'd been driving around Los Angeles. According to investigators, he offered explanations to friends and business associates when questions arose, while authorities allege Celeste's remains remained concealed inside the vehicle. Then, sometime around late August or early September 2025, the Tesla was left abandoned on a public street in the Hollywood Hills. Neighbors noticed it. The city noticed it. On September 5th, the Department of Transportation marked it, issued a citation. 2 days later, it was towed to Hollywood Tow on Mansfield Avenue, just off Romaine Street, a few miles from the Sunset Strip. The car sat there. Then, on September 8th, 2025, workers at the impound lot couldn't ignore the smell anymore. They called police. Officers arrived shortly after. They opened the frunk. Inside were 2 cadaver bags. Investigators discovered human remains that had been concealed for months. The condition of the remains immediately indicated that extensive forensic examination would be required before investigators could fully understand what had happened. Personal belongings recovered with the remains would later help investigators identify the victim. By then, Celeste had been missing for more than a year. She was found the day after what would have been her 15th birthday. At first, detectives had a body and no identity. The remains were severely decomposed. The medical examiner listed cause of death as deferred pending further investigation, which meant weeks of forensic work before anyone would know for certain who this girl was. But there were details, small ones. That tattoo, on her finger, the same one Burke had photographed on his own hand in September 2024. The car was registered in Hempstead, Texas, to David Anthony Burke. That detail moved fast through the LAPD. Detectives began examining Burke's connection to Celeste and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. By September 16, 2025, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner formally identified the remains as Celeste Rivas Hernandez through dental records. She had been missing since April 2024, 17 months. The Riverside County Sheriff's Office confirmed the identification. Celeste's family was notified. Her family is heartbroken and devastated by this tragic loss. Read a statement shared to a GoFundMe shortly after. As many of you know, Celeste Rivas Hernandez has been identified as the body found last week. Then the search warrants started. LAPD executed a search of Burke's Hollywood Hills property. Investigators reportedly used luminol to look for blood. Meanwhile, prosecutors allege Burke had made 3 separate trips to Lake Cashuma, a reservoir in Santa Barbara County about 110 miles northwest of Los Angeles, to dispose of evidence. In January 2026, Celeste's passport was recovered there. Prosecutors believe the trips were part of an effort to conceal evidence connected to the case. Before we get into what investigators uncovered next, if you've been following this case with me so far, take a second to leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you think investigators had enough evidence at this point to connect Burke to Celeste's disappearance? And if you're enjoying these deep dive crime documentaries, liking the video helps more people discover the channel. Now, because what happened next would turn this investigation into a national story. For months after the identification, LAPD's investigation moved quietly. Burke remained publicly silent. His management team said he was fully cooperating with authorities. He pulled the remaining dates from a U.S. tour. Behind the scenes, something bigger was building. A grand jury was convened in Los Angeles. Subpoenas went out to Burke's family in Texas. His family's attorneys challenged those subpoenas in Texas court, arguing due process violations. In February 2026, a Texas appeals court denied their petition. The family was ordered to comply. Documents from those Texas proceedings were unsealed in late February 2026, and suddenly the world had its first clear look at where this was heading. The court filings named David Anthony Burke as the target of the investigation. 1 count of murder, the dismemberment details. 2 bags, the decomposed head and torso, the arms and legs separated, were laid out in court language, clinical and devastating. One private investigator involved in the case told reporters that, in his view, the evidence pointed strongly toward Burke. Celeste's former teacher came forward, telling media that D4VD and Celeste had met on social media when she was a student in his class. He had seen their connection forming. He had the kinds of details that made the story feel real, grounded, heartbreaking. On April 16, 2026, nearly a year after prosecutors believed Celeste was killed. David Anthony Burke was arrested at his Hollywood Hills residence at 5 p.m. He was booked at the LAPD's 77th Street station at 11:12 p.m. No bail. On April 20th, 2026, Burke was formally charged. First-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14 years of age, unlawful mutilation of human remains. The special circumstance allegations are significant: murder of a witness, murder for financial gain, and murder by lying in wait. Those allegations make him eligible for the death penalty. Prosecutors have not yet said whether they will seek it. Burke pleaded not guilty. His attorneys, Blair Burke and Marilyn Bednarski, two of the most prominent criminal defense lawyers in Los Angeles, vowed to fight the charges. At the press conference announcing the charges, Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman stood in front of a portrait of Celeste. "I am a parent of 3 children," he said, "and a parent's nightmare is a situation where your daughter goes out one night and never comes back." Celeste's parents, Jesus Rivas and Mercedes Martinez, released a statement. They called their daughter a beautiful, strong girl who loved to sing and dance. They said they miss her deeply. They thanked law enforcement. And they said clearly, simply, "All we want is justice." As the case moved toward a preliminary hearing, scheduled for late June 2026, to determine whether there's enough evidence for a full trial, more details continued to surface. Burke's own song catalog became an eerie undercurrent to the whole story. Romantic Homicide. That was the song that made him famous. The same title was reportedly the name on his Tesla's registration in Texas. How you interpret that is up to you, but it's the kind of detail you don't forget. Prosecutors say they recovered text messages and other digital evidence from Burke's phone, documenting the nature of their relationship. They say the evidence shows a calculated, sustained grooming relationship that began when Celeste was barely old enough to be in middle school. And then, prosecutors allege, when she threatened to expose the relationship, he killed her. Prosecutors allege he then dismembered her body, concealed her remains, disposed of evidence, misled people around him about the odor coming from the vehicle, continued working, and hoped the case would never come to light. It didn't go away. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was born on September 7th, 2010. She was found on September 8th, 2025. The day after what would have been her 15th birthday. She was a girl who ran away sometimes. And that detail, that pattern, is part of why she fell through the cracks for so long. Because when a teenager has disappeared before and come back, the system tends to wait. The people around her tend to hope. She was also a girl who, according to prosecutors, became involved with someone far older than she was. Her family is still waiting for a trial. The preliminary hearing is set for late June 2026. If a judge determines there's sufficient evidence, David Anthony Burke will face trial for her murder. He's currently held without bail. Celeste's passport was recovered from a reservoir. Her remains were discovered inside an abandoned Tesla in a Hollywood impound lot. And nearly a year after prosecutors say she was killed, the people who loved her are still waiting for answers. Still waiting for justice. She was 14 years old. She deserved better.
If this case stayed with you, you're not the only one. And if you're ready for the details most people miss, there's more waiting in the full Hidden Chapters playlist.